The seventh gene key. The transformational path of the seventh gene key moves from division to virtue, and it's the path of guidance. The seventh gene key is one of the truly global gene keys, and its far-off aim is really nothing short of complete global realization, which gives you some idea of its weight in the human genome. So all those people who therefore have this gene key in their profiles have a profound responsibility resting on their shoulders to guide humanity into the future, and hopefully into a new and a better future. The seventh shadow, on the other side, also exerts a very powerful influence on the direction of our species through this seventh gene key. And in the Gene Keys book, the title of the gift is The Power Behind the Throne. So these are influential people placed throughout society, and depending on their agenda, their frequency, they collectively pull humanity towards further chaos, or they pull us towards integration and wholeness. And the seventh gene key definitely has potent leadership potential, but they're not really leaders per se. They are people with influence. And in any group, for example, the seventh gene key, it carries this power that when it speaks, others will tend to listen. And they may not like what they hear, but the aura of the seventh gene key has a kind of frequency that sounds as though it really might know what it's talking about. So these are the people we naturally tend to listen to. But you have to think about that. If someone has an agenda, for example, to make as much money as they can without a care for anyone else, then just through the power of this gene key, through this code, the chances are they'll find people who will listen to them and then follow them and help them achieve their aims. So the seventh shadow can really take advantage of the shadow. And remember, the shadow is the victim frequency. And the dilemma of the seventh shadow is all about boundaries. If you don't have a strong sense of your own core stability, then you're at risk of being pulled along in the current of someone else's seventh gene key agenda. It can sound exciting, it can sound enticing, it can sound captivating and filled with promise. But if you're not discerning, you're very likely going to fall victim to this energy in the world. So the first aspect of understanding this shadow is to learn how to have strong boundaries, to have restraint. And on the other side, it's to realize that the shadow here is the shadow of division. And if you don't have a clear-cut intention that is grounded and rooted in service, then division is what you're going to end up creating. The seventh shadow is part of the ring of union, a genetic coding family that governs a smooth relating process with others. So a seventh gene key and a selfish or a self-obsessed agenda is going to create a real mess in the world. It happens all the time. And this is why boundaries are so important. It's not enough to have good intentions. You have to be able to show understanding and commitment. These are the two key gifts of this codon group. Not to mention the seventh gene key's programming partner, the 13th gift, which is discernment. I mentioned that a few times. And the seventh shadow is not good at boundaries. Often it's very eagerness to be of service without the proper maturity and support, or the ability to listen is a cocktail for, what will become eventual disappointment. And many a project is begun by the seventh gene key that ends up as a divisive situation in which people are hurt, resentful, and just plain angry at the lack of clarity and commitment and humility coming from the seventh gene key. The seventh gift, guidance. It's the gift of guidance that's so often misunderstood at the shadow frequency. So with the shadow, this gene key is offered and proffered without awareness, and even more importantly, without invitation. And there's a deep need for recognition that comes out of this seventh shadow. It craves attention. It feeds the will to power. So if you have this gene key, please examine your motives for guiding others very, very carefully. You should only guide reluctantly and when truly called upon. You're not the great initiator. This is the gift of sages. So it doesn't run out into the world seeking people to guide. They have to seek you out. And if they do find you, then don't rush to say yes either. That's not what it's about. Consider the situation and the person carefully. Let them know you're considering it, and then be honest when you've decided. Because sometimes the best guidance is not to guide. That takes a really deep strength. Most people actually don't need guidance. They need someone to listen to them. I'm amazed sometimes in the role I find myself in, because whenever I go out into the world as a teacher, which now is fairly rare, when people come up and talk to me, a lot of the time they end up doing almost all the talking, and I stand there and I listen to them. But they're often so desperate that they just forget all about me. I could be anyone, actually. And I don't really mind, but I just feel for them, because if they were able to be a little bit quieter, perhaps a bit more present in their body, then we could exchange something deeper than simply their urge to be heard and seen. And it's just a phenomenon, this. And the other beauty of the gift of guidance is that it knows how to be still. Guidance is really about being with someone. It's about presence. It's about resonating with them, taking them in, drawing their energies into your cells, into your blood, into your heart. And this is the deepest form of guidance. Guidance through embodiment. Guidance through non-guidance. One of my favourite pastimes these days is drinking fine and rare teas. And it's become a teaching that accompanies the Gene Keys. It's entered into the bloodstream of our community, and many of us are doing it. And it's a wonderful form of guidance. You sit with someone and you prepare a fine tea, and as you pour the tea and then you drink it together, the ritual of this act brings you closer together. And what happens is that you're entering into the field of guidance. It isn't even from one person to another. It's in the field that lies between you and the other. It's a true dialogue. It's what the Japanese call a harage, a dance between two bellies, two haras, harage. The guidance comes from life, from the Tao, from the simple act of being together without too much of an agenda. And it's an exquisite thing. It's beauty in action. So the gift arises on its own out of the fertile field of the shadow. You sit, you cultivate the presence, and then the gift just floats up into the space. And each of the 64 gifts carries its own form of guidance. We're really just being hosts for each other. And this is the magic present in this codon ring, the ring of union, that guidance comes from reflection, from pausing, from being with each other, just from sitting in another aura, just from relaxing, even talking about ordinary things together. That's how the invisible truth enters in. The seventh siddhi, virtue. When we use the word virtue as a siddhi, we need to realize that we are using a word in its broadest and most multi-dimensional capacity. English as a modern language has the great advantage of being universal in potential, but the great disadvantage of being somewhat one-dimensional. And some of these other more ancient languages, or languages that are derived from scripts and pictograms, kind of have at their disposal many more dimensions for each word. So for example, one Chinese term for virtue might be the word Dai, as in Tao Te Ching. But this word also has many other meanings. One of them is a kind of telesmic power, or moral fortitude, or even just power. So there are many levels to it. So when we think of the word virtue, we need to think of the source of all that is best in us. We need to think of the qualities latent in our soul. We need to picture those aspects of our essence that are going to travel onwards when we die and give up our body. This virtue is the light inside, the illuminated dream of eternity hidden in your bones. And how are we going to find our hidden virtue? How shall we invite its aroma to be released into the air of our lives? Here are some ways that I come up with. Cease thinking or speaking of others in a negative light. Virtue is as delicate as a wild orchid, and it can't thrive or even breathe when we cast our own shadows upon each other. So protect your virtue from such thoughts. And if you find others speaking ill of others, protect yourself from those sick winds, those sick words. Be forgiving towards others and let them feel the warmth of your care for them. But realize that the way you think about others is like the sunlight or the darkness cast before the flower of your virtue. And if you do this over time, the flower of your virtue will return to your heart. and it will grow strong, and it will release its sweet perfume far and wide, stirring magical currents and wonderful things. We've seen that the seventh gene key has a quality of leadership and influence. And in the original translation, it's known as the army. And there's often a lot of commentary around this idea of the army and the general. This was a cultural and a historical image which I'd kind of like to move away from. The structure of this gene key is more really to do with the water that is hidden in the earth. That's its symbol. Water hidden in the earth. So like our inner virtue, it's hidden until it rises to the surface in mysterious places and ways as springs. And people are naturally drawn to springs. Rivers and lakes flow from springs. Towns and settlements form around springs. The spring is a healing place for all creatures to come and be together. And virtue is also something we can accumulate, just as water accumulates beneath the ground over the centuries. And we accumulate virtue through our positive actions, thoughts, and deeds. We don't see the drops of water filling the great lakes below, but every drop brings the water nearer to the surface. And then one day, when our virtue is brimming over, suddenly it erupts up through the cracks of our life, and it begins to flow from our hearts and out through our aura as effervescent light, as tangible goodwill and benevolence. I actually quite like the idea of an army of virtues, arming themselves to combat the negativity of the world. And someone asked me recently what my definition of synarchy was. Synarchy is the 44th city. It's the highest form of human government. And my answer was that synarchy is a hierarchy of virtue. It's a world in which the lowliest, the humblest, rise naturally to the top. It's exactly the opposite to what we see today, where wealth favours the striver. But one day, wealth will no longer rise, but it will sink down to the ocean floor. And there it's going to come to rest beside the humble ones, the true sages, those who have silently, invisibly, over the millennia, remained hidden from view, cultivating love and virtue and holding the vision of harmony in a higher world, where all can drink from the same inexhaustible spring, the spring of virtues.